Hello. Welcome back from lunch, everybody. We're so glad everyone's still with us. Hello to the people online. I have the great honor and privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Belle Wheelan. Dr. Wheelan currently serves as the president of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges. She is the first African American and woman to serve in this capacity. Her career spans 40 years and includes roles of faculty member, Chief Student Services Officer, Campus Provost, College President, and Secretary of Education. In several of those roles, she was the first African American and/or woman to serve in those capacities. Dr. Wheelan received her bachelor's degree from Trinity University in Texas with a double major of psychology and sociology, her master's from Louisiana State University in developmental educational psychology, and her doctorate from the University of Texas at Austin in educational administration with a special concentration in community college leadership. She has received numerous awards in recognition. She holds and has held membership in numerous local, state, and national organizations. Dr. Wheelan attributes her success to hard work, endurance, tenacity, and being in the right place at the right time. She recognizes that prayer and support from family and friends make anything possible, and she's also the mother of an adult son named Reginald. We're thrilled to have Dr. Wheelan here today. Hope you enjoy her presentation.
Thank you. Greetings. What's up? I don't know who I angered that they invited me to keep you awake after lunch, but I'm going to do my best. It is a pleasure to be here in the Commonwealth. It really is. The only thing I regret is that I don't have enough time to hit the Bourbon Trail while I'm here. Yeah, I'll have to come back. It's okay. They told me I could. How many of you are not in higher ed who are in the room? Everybody's in, no, just one. Okay, well, good. So this is not going to be new information for you. I'm hoping that we can have a conversation. For those of you who are online, I don't know how you're getting questions to the group, but if you have some, then, send them in and we'll see if we can address them. I've been asked to talk about the future of higher education, and it was cloudy when I left Atlanta, so I didn't bother to bring my crystal ball this morning when I left. But there are some things going on, and there's some trends that I think are evolving that institutions of different types are grabbing onto. It's not the entire field of higher ed yet. It just, pieces are doing this, and it's like, oh, well, that works at your place. Maybe we can try it over there. And so I don't know why we don't just wholesale do things sometimes. We just have to wait and see and let you screw it up first before we try it. So I don't know, but it's nice to see a group that is old enough to know David Letterman, because you remember the top 10 lists that David Letterman used to always do. Well, I brought my top 10 issues that I thought we'd address. There are many more that we could talk about. One of your participants just asked me, was starting to ask me a finance question. I almost freaked because finance is not my area. So I always carry Donna Barrett's phone number and email address with me so that you can call her. But so there are areas that might concern you all today that I am not going to address. But I hope that you will pick up the phone and call your institutional liaison from our office to find out what it is, or call Donna if it's a finance issue or accounting issue, or call me and I'll figure out to whom to route you. But I don't want you not knowing just because you don't want to pick up the phone. We really are very friendly people. Contrary to popular belief, we really are encouraging innovation, contrary to popular belief. People think, oh, well, we can't do that because the accreditor will not let. Yeah, we will. Come on, people, stop throwing that back at me. We will. You just have to explain it. You have to defend it. You have to give us enough detail to be able to say, well, that sounds reasonable. So we'll start with these. The first one is going to be enrollment. We'll talk about what's going on there. Student debt and the cost of higher ed, and the impact of technology, different curricular offerings, completion rates, leadership, external influences, academic offerings from non-institutional entities, credentials, and then who knows what number 10 is going to be, okay? So let's start with student enrollment. Right now, I think all of you are aware of the fact that the traditional 18-year-old college population has dwindled. Birth rates have declined and are anticipated to continue to decline at least for the next 5 years. So those institutions whose enrollment has been traditionally that 18-year-old graduate right out of high school, is going to be struggling for students. By the same token, those institutions like community colleges and technical colleges who have built their enrollment on adult enrollments are also struggling, interestingly enough, but it's more because of the pandemic than it is anything else that we can identify. They have just stopped coming to class. They are, a lot of them, we saw that over the last 5 years, the majority of students in higher ed were females. And so when the pandemic hit and children had to come back home, mommy had to come back home to monitor what they were doing while they were there all day as well. And so it has definitely hit the enrollment at those institutions that have more adult students than anything else. There are a large number of students who have gotten disinterested in college or just gotten turned off for a variety of reasons. They went. I have one of those who lives in my family. He got his associate's degree because I was at home and made sure he went to class and he got all his work. When I left and went to Atlanta, he went, hallelujah, I don't have to listen to this woman anymore. He had enrolled in George Mason and he just stopped going to class. You know, like many students. So not only he did earn his associate's degree, but not only does he not have a bachelor's degree, he has a terrible grade point average because he just stopped going to class. Students don't understand that there is a process that will protect you, from messing up your GPA if you just bother to go to the registrar's office and say, hey, I want out of here. And so trying to convince him to go back has, for a lifelong educator to have a child who loved to go to school but didn't want to do anything while he was there was quite an adjustment on my part. And so trying to get him to go back and finish that bachelor's degree is a challenge. Lots of Reggies out there. A lot of folks for whom life just gets in the way. You know, they've started a career and family came along and job changes came along and, family illnesses came along and they stopped out. And so you will see a lot of institutions focusing more on retrieving those students for whom they have some college but no degree. And they're offering scholarship incentives to them to get them back in because they need the enrollment numbers. Plus, the country needs educated and credentialed people. And so it's a win-win situation if we can talk them into coming back. But that's a movement that 48 years ago when I started teaching was not something on which we were focused. We didn't worry about people. If you left, you left. Okay, we have a gazillion more coming in behind you. We weren't really worried about it. But now, not only for our own enrollments, but because the caliber of employee for which we're looking needs that credential, that completion of that degree, whatever it is that they have. There are a large number of adult students and many more senior institutions that had focused on 18-year-olds are now looking at that adult population. Many more are going online because they know that adults will take online courses at 2 o'clock in the morning when the house is quiet and they can get something done in order to boost their enrollment. There's an increase in online enrollments, and the transfer of credit issue is still hanging out there, and it is still creating challenges for many students. There is a movement called the passport is the colloquial name for it. There's an interstate passport, blah, 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 blah. I don't remember what the whole name is. But it's a group of colleges that have come together and agreed upon the concepts or the outcomes that if students can show that they've mastered them, they will give them the college credit for it, making it easier for them to transfer into this group of colleges. I would love to see that go on. I will give you a heads up. About 5 years ago, I told my board that they would know I was ready to retire when I came to them and said I would like to put in a policy that says all SACSCOC accredited institutions will accept credits from all other SACSCOC accredited institutions. Because that's going to create a firestorm. Faculty are going to go ballistic if we're suddenly saying you've got to take those credits. I'm looking at retiring in 3 years, so watch out. May come before you know it. But there's got to be something that we can do that makes life easier for students to transfer. They're still spending an exorbitant amount of time and money repeating classes that they've already taken, and it just makes no sense. And some of that, I think, having been in the field for so long, came because we needed the enrollments. I can't give you credit for something if I got faculty who already teach it, so you've obviously got to take it again. But I don't know that there's that reasoning anymore. It doesn't make any sense. So we've got to do something, because we also need to get those people into the workforce a lot faster than we currently are. And if transfer is something that's keeping them out of it, then that's something on which we have some control. Okay? So what are we going to do? Well, like I said, we're looking at increasing our efforts to recruit students who have some college but no degree. That's a big thing across our region, especially. I'm not sure there's 10% of our institutions are not doing that. Everybody else is getting on that bandwagon because, again, that's enrollments that you can get, and it's easy. You don't have to sell them on the institution because they've already been there. If anything, you may have to overcome some negative thoughts they have about the institution, but it should be something you could change if you know about them. So that's a big thing that's going on now. Again, the increase in the efforts to enroll adult students, still mostly online. I don't know if senior institutions think you're going to pollute the room if you add adults to the classroom where they're 18-year-olds. I don't know what that is, but community colleges have been educating adults forever. I spent 28 years in community colleges, and my very first class had a gentleman 65 years old in there. I'm 22 going, what am I going to teach you? I'm not sure I taught him anything, but he was a great asset to the class because he was able to share life experiences with these young people that their parents had already shared with them, but of course that has no value because you're my parents. You're supposed to tell me that stuff. When somebody else tells me, though, then I'll listen up. And so it really was a wonderful experience, but senior institutions still have special sections a lot of times for adult students, or they have the adult college, which is the antithesis of the dual enrollment program, or the middle college. You've got the young people. We don't believe in putting the masses together or something. I don't know. But both of those groups are providing life rafts for a lot of institutions because they're going after those populations in order to increase their enrollments. And then again, we do have institutions that are beginning to evaluate their transfer of credit policies. The articulation agreements that have come in place, we were talking about that one a little earlier. In-state articulation agreements are very prevalent. You know, the community college system and the senior colleges within a state all are articulating left and right. You know, you finish your associate's degree, then you can come and transfer in as a junior and not lose any credits. But across the states, we don't talk to each other. You know, we're in the same region. We very little articulation agreement. I was looking at one of my institutions that just signed an articulation agreement with the Borough of Manhattan Community College, which is great. But what about the community college down the street from where you live or across the border, you know, in the next state that's in the same region? I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but we've got to do something about evaluating that. Comments or questions on enrollment? I will get you to ask questions. I'll tell you a story. I always share this when I'm giving presentations because people kind of go, God, don't look at me because you ask me a question. I taught child psychology for 10 years, and we were talking one day about the advantages mothers have of breastfeeding their children versus bottle feeding them because they can pass the antigens on, to their babies, and you can bond with them because we haven't found a way to detach a breast yet. Maybe that's coming. But I had a young woman ask me if black women had chocolate milk in their breasts. Much like this, some people fell out laughing hysterically. They could not believe she asked that question. Others sat there and shocked it. No, she didn't ask that question. But there was a cadre of students that you could see was trying to process the possibility of black women having chocolate milk. So after the laughter died down, I told them, that was the most interesting question I had ever been asked. But to the best of my knowledge, there were no flavoring packets in black women's breasts. That all breast milk was the same. And I would rather her ask me that because she was paying me to educate her than stop some sister on the street, and ask her. So I share that story because there are no stupid questions, okay? So whatever question you have, and it's also biologically impossible to grow an ulcer and laugh at the same time. So if somebody laughs at you, just thank them because they've helped you prevent an ulcer. But maybe in Kentucky you all aren't having student enrollment problems, but all your sister institutions in the other 10 states in this region are. Even some of the flagship institutions across the regions are still having that difficulty. Finance is one of the reasons it keeps people out as well. Financial aid hasn't necessarily kept up with the costs that students have to pay. And when you look at I'm not working, I've lost this job, I only have this much discretionary money, and I have to decide whether I'm going to provide food for my children and family or go to college, it just kind of doesn't balance out there. And so many institutions with small endowments have great difficulty providing the additional financial assistance because they just don't have the money to give. So there's a lot of stuff that's tied up into that, but enrollment is a biggie because many of our institutional budgets are still enrollment based. And you lose students, you lose money, then you start having to lay off faculty and staff and administrators. Let's not forget and administrators, because faculty and staff always complain we lay them off before we lay off administrators, which is sometimes true. Speaking of debt, right now there is and has been a decline in state support. It's coming back. It's not coming back nearly as robustly as we would like for it to, but many of the states in our region are starting to finance higher ed more. We were talking earlier about the TAG grant being increased. That's happening across our region. State legislators are understanding that students go to public and private institutions, that the private institutions need some of that support and deserve some of the support because they're doing what the state institutions either don't have room to do or choose not to do a lot of times. We have a lot of institutions that are closing, and those that are closing or merging are doing so for financial reasons. Very seldom do we have institutions coming to us saying, this institution over here has this great curriculum and we want to merge that curriculum. No, it's because we need the money that they have. We need, the expertise that they have so that we can increase the enrollment so that therefore we can stay open. Or I need for them to take me in because they can help me, financially and stuff. So there are a lot more mergers and acquisitions going on, but we also have more closures that we think will happen over the next 5 years because of the cost of higher ed. The implementation of performance-based funding is something that 48 years ago when I started working was not in the cards. It's only been in the last 20, 25 years that states have decided we're going to pay you, but we're not going to do it based on number of students that you have. We're going to do it on graduates that you have and people that you put in the workplace, and let's see what kind of products we're getting. What am I getting? What bang am I getting for my buck? Is that the expression? There's an increase in maintenance of effort and construction and other costs that are really hurting. Retirement funding is one that's hurting a lot of institutions now because the states that have been, for state institutions, that have been paying some of those retirement dollars are now shifting those dollars or those bills over to the institution. And so now out of your budget, you also have to include the cost of retirements that you anticipate coming forward. And that on top of how do you build a new building with the cost of steel and even wood, and lumber nowadays. I mean, all the costs for infrastructure have increased, and yet we expect you who have these wonderful ivy-covered wall institutions that have been around for a long time to maintain the effort to keep them up as well. It's unbelievable. And yet, if you raise tuition, then you hear it from everybody. I remember when I went to Virginia, 1987. The state was paying 70% of the cost of educating students. 70%. Students only paid 30% of the cost of their education. When I left there 17 years ago to go to the commission, they were paying 4%. Big drop, big drop. And so they go from, I'm a state institution to a state-supported institution to a state-located institution, because all of those costs, the states, have a finite amount of money, and they're going to K-12 schools, they're going to prisons, they're going to roads, all the infrastructure things we have, and higher education is a luxury in a state budget. But they still want you to produce the quality of graduates that you've been producing all along and provide the number of employees, that they need to go into their companies, but with less money. And so you start charging the students. Well, you start charging students, and then parents start complaining about how costly it is, and students who are affording their own tuition do the same thing, and so what do? I was sharing with the president a minute ago that I enjoyed being president. I was president twice. I wouldn't be a president today for all the tea in China. It's just different, it's more political, it's more expensive. The accountability is more visible. Everybody wants to see all of your outcomes on your web page. They want to see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's not a bad thing, but it's different. And having to defend some of those numbers, I get to go before NACICI, which is the group that makes a recommendation to the Department of Ed as to whether we keep our recognition with the department. And if I lose that recognition, you all lose access to federal financial aid. So I'm trying not to do that. We have done everything we can and we should be okay. But they're wanting to know, how do you accredit an institution that's got a 4% graduation rate? That's difficult to answer, since I don't have anything to do with the students who come in and leave. But I'm validating that it's a quality institution, even though there aren't graduating but 4 students. They don't take into consideration that many of those students never went there with the intention of graduating anyway. They needed 2 or 3 classes so they could get a promotion, in the current job that they have. And so you're a failure if you didn't graduate them, because that's what colleges do. They graduate people. Trying to explain that to the legislature in Washington has been a challenge. How about what we do from here? Well, we can start by trying to educate state legislators on funding needs. That's why I said over the last 5 years it's gotten better. I think they have come to understand. We have learned not to just go ourselves as educators to the General Assembly, because it seems like it's self-serving if we're asking for money for our institution, but if we can garner the support of local employers who depend upon the students that we graduate or that we educate, they listen to them. They have a much louder voice than we do, because they are external and they're asking on our behalf, or actually on their own behalf, and not for the institution. And so trying to get them to understand that, you can overlook us and underfund us, but if you do, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to lose our positional power in this world if we can't keep up with the number of productive tax-paying individuals that we need to have. We can educate faculty and staff on the impact of performance-based funding. I had an office mate for 10 years who said his job was to weed out students. Now, this is a community college, okay, where students come because they want to make a difference in their lives, they want to make a better life for themselves. Your job is not to weed anybody out. Your job is to educate these folks so that they can survive and they can move on. And you still have some faculty out there, whether they are long-tenured faculty or brand-new faculty. They still don't understand their responsibility and their impact on the funding that your institution gets. Because if they aren't working with the students to help them be productive, if they just say, here's my job is to teach and it's your job to learn and never the twain shall meet, then they don't pass the class and you get less funding. So we have to educate our faculty and staff as well on the impact of what they do every day and how it has to do with them keeping their own jobs. In one of my first presidency, I was in Lynchburg, Virginia. A very small community, everybody knew everybody. And so I wanted folks to understand that I was a real person. So on the weekends, I wore jeans, but I also wore a college sweatshirt or t-shirt. And invariably people would go, oh, do you go to CVCC? I said, every day, isn't it wonderful? It's a great place to go. To help them understand that we're all in this together, and that the image, if I want to keep my job, then people have to have an appreciation for who we are and what we do. You shouldn't be embarrassed to say, yeah, I teach at the community college, it's life-changing. It really is life-changing. And to be proud of what it is that you do and to take ownership of helping somebody become successful is extremely important, not in the life of those students, not just in the life of those students, but also in the amount of money that the legislature gives you, because they want to see those good, positive, completion numbers coming through. Finding ways to refinance debt has been an interesting one as well. Our presidents as wonderful and as smart as they are, oftentimes have no clue about finance. I was one of them. I put my money in the savings account and I knew it was going to draw some interest, but beyond that, don't ask me about refinancing debt. I get a credit card, I pay it off. We don't know anything about, and when we start talking about debt at institutions of higher learning, we're talking about serious numbers sometimes. And so that's where CFOs come into play. And we have some presidents who don't want to listen, or they don't listen well. I can't imagine that, but I have found that we really do. And so in those of you who are CFOs, you have a responsibility to stand up and say, yo, brother, let me tell you something. We are going to close our doors in 2 years if we don't do this, 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 and this. And trying to get a lower interest rate on the money that we borrowed is the first place to start, because banks still want customers. Okay, and they'd be willing to give you a few more years at a lower interest just to keep you around. Sometimes you have to speak that plainly to the person who's leading the institution, because finance is not their area. I was a psychology major. I didn't major in finance. I didn't even take economics in college. It wasn't on the curriculum requirement, so I stayed away from it because I knew I didn't know what they were talking about anyhow. I never had enough money to worry about. So you have to do that. You have to take your responsibility seriously and help educate your presidents. Now, don't walk in knowing that they don't know what they're doing and try to, upstage them and anything. You got to lead them along so that they think it's their idea sometimes. But you really do have to help them understand the finance of the situation. I depend very heavily on our CFO. We have an investment account Jay knows about, and when it goes up and down, I have to ask the questions. Do we have the right formula? What are you thinking is going on here? Your opinion is important, but you have to make your opinion important in their eyes. You can't just assume that they're going to assume that you know what you're talking about, because many of them don't, because they don't know what you're talking about. Tuition discounting at our private institutions has gone through the roof. There are institutions that we accredit that have as much as a 90% discount rate. You cannot keep an institution open if you are discounting tuition like that and you don't have an endowment to back it up. It just doesn't happen. And when you build a budget based on a certain number of students and those students don't show up, and you're left with those students who are on financial aid and scholarships and stuff, you don't have any income coming in. You've got to do something about that. I think the Chronicle or one of the higher ed rags had an article this week that said 56% is the average tuition discount rate. That is still way too high in order for institutions to survive. So we're going back to those closing of institutions because they don't have enough money to keep doors open. Increasing fundraising efforts, we were laughing about those fish fries that churches have, to raise money. Fish fries work at colleges and universities too. My freshman year at Trinity, we raffled off a case of toilet paper. We raised $50,000 raffling off a case of toilet paper. And this was back in 68 to 72. Can you imagine during the pandemic if we had raffled off a case of toilet paper? Oh my goodness. You have to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, and use what you got to get what you want. But we've got to do a better job of increasing our fundraising. We don't always sing our praises loudly enough for people who have some money to be willing to contribute to it. It's embarrassing to go beg for money. I told somebody, I'm Catholic. I've been on my knees for 70 years, praying and begging. I have no problems asking people, if I believe in the cause, I have no problems going out asking somebody, to support that cause. And we have got to learn how to do that. And not just the president and the institutional advancement person, but everybody in the institution has got to take advantage of the contacts that they have of giving scholarships. I tell the small private institutions all the time that their students don't understand that if 100 of you give $10 a month, that's better than nobody giving anything a month. It'll buy books. It can go into the emergency book account that we have for students. It can, food insecurity, it can go buy groceries, for students who are coming to you. So there's no amount too large or too small, but everybody's got to believe in it and go for it in order for it to be successful. Innovative ways to fund capital projects. We're seeing many more public-private partnerships now than we ever did before. I think it started 15 years ago anyway with dormitories. Colleges that needed dorms couldn't afford them, and so they partnered with a local hotel. They said, you build a hotel on our campus and we will rent those rooms from you for our students. And then all kinds of public-private partnerships are now in place with chemistry labs and engineering labs and everything in between. Because institutions need the facilities, but they can't pay for them. In Virginia, the state would not pay for gymnasia or auditoria at community colleges. They didn't feel we needed them, so we called them lecture halls. We added the tall room, cascading seats, so that they were bleachers, exactly, but we called them cascading seats so they could feel good about them, because that was the only way we can get around it. Or a lot of them partnered with the National Guard. And the National Guard would build a building on campus because we had the land, and then we could use their gym, for our athletic programs and our PE classes and stuff. So it's not a new idea to have those partnerships, but it's not a wholesale idea either. People have not caught on to that nearly as much as I think it would benefit them. We had a session at the annual meeting 3 years ago now, since we were not in person during the pandemic, on public-private partnerships, and got some good questions from folks who are now looking at the possibility of putting some of those on their campus. We put in a financial literacy requirement. You might remember that in 2017 when we redid our standards. In response to the federal government, specifically Virginia Fox, who was chair of the House Education Committee at the time, who was threatening to keep funding from institutions because their students did not pay their loans. And so I asked them, I said, the federal government gives the loans, and the federal government decides how much money a student can get. Why are you penalizing a college when they don't have anything to do with giving out the money? And so I said, what we can do, though, is to help educate students to understand what happens when you don't pay back a loan. Because a federal loan is going to be paid even after you're dead. They're coming after your estate, whatever that is, because they're going to get their money back. And students don't understand that. When you buy a car, do you understand what happens when, what the compounded interest is, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why you have the requirement as an institution to teach financial literacy. It's something that should be done in junior high school or middle school, but it's not. And so now there are a couple of states in our region that have now mandated that high schools offer a financial literacy course, but I'm proud to say we were first. Saying that colleges would take on that responsibility, because it's not just a federal student loan, it's any kind of debt. Students don't understand how to, what financing is all about. Many of our students are first generation college going students who've never had any money before, and so suddenly they get this big pot of money to go to school and to, pay for babysitters and transportation and whatever else they want to do, and they don't understand that money has to be paid back. And so we have to explain that to them. Comments on cost and debt? It's only going to get worse. Yes, sir.
I have a conceptual question. My institution is primarily traditional undergraduate. So when we talk about student loans, and we talk about how a student uses those loan proceeds, whether that's for the actual cost of tuition, room and board, or the cost of living.
Right.
And the relationship between that refund to the student relative to their borrowing for the cost of maintaining transportation, living expense, and all that. Is there any, in your circles, is there any rumblings at the federal level talking about the differentiation between those two things?
No, all they hear is that it's not being paid back. I mean, I really have not heard them differentiate between, an on-campus room and board versus living at home paying rent. Their whole issue is, we loaned you the money, now we need it back so that somebody else can get it. I've not heard them distinguish between the two, no. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who understand that or believe that, but I haven't heard it.
Okay, great, thanks. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Technology. Currently, we use them for administrative stuff and for instructional stuff. We started using it for instructional stuff more in the last 3 years out of necessity because we couldn't get students to campus because of the pandemic. Nobody thought we could be as nimble as we were and to get it up and running as quickly as we could. And even though there were questions about the quality of the educational offerings online, you don't even hear those rumblings as much anymore. They're just, they being whoever they are out there, are just very impressed that we were able to respond as quickly as we could. This is the one area where I saw more collaboration than I have in the entire 17 years I've been at the commission, because we had about 77 of our 791 members who were not approved to offer online classes at all, and they had to get up to snuff very quickly. And so they actually picked up the phone and called colleagues to say, hey, can we hook into your system? Would you send your instructional designers over to help our faculty? I mean, we actually shared resources during that time. It was just warmed the cockles of my heart. It was just wonderful to see that happening. What's going to happen in the future? Well, I think we're going to continue to have to be flexible, whether it's because of the way we bring in adult students or high school students to our classes, whether it's because we know that adults are the ones that are going to be coming through and we have to make sure we meet them, or what it is. So we're going to have to learn to be flexible. We have to build our budgets to include temporary employee cost. For those, as enrollments come and go, we don't hire as many full-time faculty or full-time staff anymore. We hire more part-timers or short-termers, as it were. And so that's got to be put into the budget, that something some institutions have not done before. And we have to identify those groups who need to be trained and see who can train them. Sometimes you have people in your institution, that are technologically savvy that you can use. Sometimes you may have to go to a colleague or to a company, that specializes in that, to bring them in to help you with whatever it is that you're doing. Okay? With curricular offerings, there's still a big rumbling, and this is cyclical because I've heard this one before in my career. General education or liberal arts versus occupational technical education. I don't think we should have a difference. I think everybody ought to learn it all. Students who are going to be lawyers ought to be able to know how to use technology as well. And those who are going to be into automotive tech need to be able to talk about current events and be able to write a legible plan or bill or response to somebody who's coming into them. But that's still a big deal out there, and you see that more in the credentialing that's in a couple of slides coming up. That, how do we shorten the time that students take to come through a college program? I think that we shortchange the students when we try to shorten the time too much, because we cut out too many of those other skill sets that they need that may not be specifically job related, but that are still needed in order to survive life. The impact of service learning has been wonderful. We're actually getting back to learning how to help people for a change. That kind of went out the window for a minute, but now that programs are offering service learning or opportunities to actually put into practice what it is that you're learning in a classroom, you find that students are much more patient than they were when they first came in, that they're more understanding of the differences of the people who live in their own communities, and things like that. We still have regular program evaluation. We have institutions that have been offering the same programs for a very long time and haven't bothered to update them sometimes. Some of those yellow tablet notes that faculty have are still in place. And you've got to, one example, we had Sweetbriar College in Virginia was going to close, and their alumni went berserk and they got it back open, but they have an equestrian program that they had since the 1800s. And I said, if you all are still teaching side saddle riding, that's not going to help this program grow, because nobody in the, in the field with horses worries about side saddle riding anymore. There's so many other things that are there. If you have a traditional art program, if you don't also have a commercial art program, then you're not going to help your. You've got to keep current the programs that you have. We still have silos. I have never understood why a student could not write one term paper and turn it in for both English and history, where the English faculty member would grade it for grammar and punctuation and structure, and the history faculty member would grade it for content. But we just force students to write two different term papers. We're dealing with students who don't have a lot of time, you know, and we could help them tremendously. Make the paper longer, but let them split it up with 2 different faculty. So what are we going to do to fix this one? Well, we started incorporating work skills into the curriculum. That's how we got technical writing and technical math rather than traditional college algebra, because there were students who did not need college algebra in the traditional sense, but who did need mathematical skills in order to be successful in their fields. Incorporate practical or service learning into the curriculum. It helps students learn. This is a, oh, that's what you meant. Kind of thing when you're trying to explain theory to them and the theory is just going way over their heads, but if you show them in a real life situation that this is what it is, then it makes a lot more sense to them. Include input from employers. Many of the occupational technical programs in community colleges have advisory boards of local employers who feed into the input into what the students are learning. You know, make sure that they can now do this and they can do this. We're not using that so much anymore, we're doing this. There's no reason the liberal arts programs can't do the same thing. You know, bring a bunch of lawyers together and talk about the skill sets that you need, or a bunch of journalists together to, you know, talk about what you need in writing. And again, those joint papers across the curriculum disciplines. Completion rates is still a biggie. Congress is still holding on to this one because again, they're paying over $1 trillion in student financial aid every year, and yet students are not graduating. And they are measuring success by the number of students who graduate, not those who transfer. Although we have now gotten them to talk about, you know, how about those who transfer? Does that not count for something? Because, you know, had they not come here, they wouldn't have been successful there. Or how many are moving from their freshman year to their sophomore year, not just having a bachelor's degree, because that's the way they were defining completion. How about the associate degrees? How about those credentials? Let's find a way to do that as well. Federal financial aid is still the measure of success, you know, how much money you're getting, how much students are spending, and then what we're getting back. But now, also, employers are needing more students. And so there's a bigger conversation going on out there now that talks about what can students do, not just in a particular trade as we would know it, but what can they do? What are those soft skills? What are those hard skills? What can they do? And so many employers are now beginning to get more involved and more demanding than ever before because they want to see their students, even if they're automotive technicians, learn how to write a legible, understandable report to you when you take your car in. You know, we don't get cars fixed anymore. We get circuit breakers replaced. I don't know about you, but I don't speak those things. I don't speak circuit breakers. I need you to tell me in simple English, what did you do to my car? And so writing up those reports is important. And if they don't know how to write and can't write legibly, so those kinds of skills translate no matter what the discipline is that we're talking about. We do need to increase involvement with students. We have to. Even in online programs, you see 24-hour tutoring available. You see 24-hour counseling available because we have to stay in touch with our students. We can't just assume because they've enrolled, they come to class, that we know what's going on with them. There are too many things that impact their success, some of which we can also impact, but if we don't talk to them, we don't know. We lose them very quickly and very early. After that first test, they're gone. They've lost interest. They've lost confidence in themselves. We need an early alert system to hold on to them so that we don't have a bunch of students who have some college but no degree. Okay, and then lastly, we have to look at those non-academic issues like food insecurity, like mental health issues that are bigger and bigger every day. Are impacting a bigger and bigger number of our students who are coming our way. So who do we put in charge? There's a good one. We don't have as many applicants for top management positions anymore. We don't even have as many applications for faculty positions anymore as we used to. People realize that they can get paid in some other careers a lot more than they get in education. They understand that the workload is very different on a college campus than it is. There is high turnover at the top. It used to be the average tenure for presidents was 10 years. Now I think it's down to 6 or 5.5. People just don't want to put up with it anymore. It's tough, it's hard, and so we need to be able to help board members pick the right person for the institution. Just because you'd make a good president doesn't necessarily mean you'd make a good president here. And they have to be willing to say, no, we need to go back out and get out into the search again because none of these fit our particular institution, rather than just picking one because you're in a hurry to do so. There are many more demands on a president. I've been a president twice, wouldn't do it again today. It's very different, it's very political, it's very expensive, it's very hostile from so many different constituent groups than ever before. We were talking earlier about the I generation. Our children have iPods, iPads, whatevers. It's it's all about me, and they come to college and they say, well, this is what I want. Yeah, okay. Let me tell you what I want. Neither of us is going to find everything we want, so we're going to have to find a happy medium. We have to help folks understand that it is not all about you necessarily. We need to offer more mentoring for first and second year presidents. I have seen too many presidents that are hired and then the board leaves them alone because they figure, well, you're the president, you ought to be able to do that. And they have nobody to help them get through. New presidents need help as well as new faculty need help, new staff need help, and students need help. And so I think we would probably have a longer tenure of top administrators if we did have mentoring programs for them. Trying to grow our own out of our own institution is also good. Because you know that they understand and appreciate and believe in the institution itself. So why not have a leadership development program where you can have people ready to move up into positions, whether it's in the finance area, whether it's in student affairs, doesn't matter. Every position needs somebody that's going to succeed those old farts like me who have been there forever, who at some point need to go, whether voluntarily or not. Training our board members is equally important. Just because you gave money to the institution doesn't mean you'd be a good board member. Or just because you didn't give money to the institution doesn't mean you won't be a good board member. They need to understand that there is a difference between being a board member and running the institution. Many of the challenges that our institutions face with their board is the board members start trying to run the institution. And then I have to come in and say, yo, time out. We got a standard that says, this is your lane, this is the administrator's lane, you run parallel, not perpendicular, or else it gets them in trouble. And then presidents need a professional development plan. If you're not going to stay there, while you're there, what do you plan to do? And how do you plan to get it done? And who do you go to? I was sharing that my first major decision that I had to make by myself as a president, I couldn't say, well, ask the president, because I was the president, had to do with choosing either token rings or Ethernets as the backbone for our computer system. Now, I'm a psychology major. All I know is I turn on the computer, it comes on. I don't know what makes it run. So the director of computer operations was an Ethernet person, and the engineering faculty were token ring, or vice versa, I forget which. So I did what any good former faculty member would do. I said, go write me a 2-page paper on the pros and cons of what you're suggesting. And then I picked up the phone and called a girlfriend who was a president. I said, what are they talking about? How do I make this decision? Presidents need to know how to do that. Presidents need to understand that they cannot think out loud, because as soon as they do, the rumor mill is going crazy with, do you know what we're going to do next? No, I just ask a question. I didn't say this is what we're going to do. So some of those survival skills you can learn from people who've already been in that system. And so why not put in a professional development plan? The external influences have gotten louder and greater, starting with state legislators. They have begun to impose themselves, there's a good word, on stuff that historically has been the purview of the institutions. Tenure is a good example, or post-tenure review is a good example. Curricular offerings. In Florida, they decided that developmental ed would not be offered anymore. Didn't bother to ask the faculty, but they just said, we're not going to do it. We're colleges and universities, we won't do that anymore. In Texas, they said every high school student can take dual enrollment. Dual enrollment was never designed for for high school freshmen. It was designed for high school seniors, actually, who had finished all of their requirements for a high school diploma, and they wanted to keep them off the street, so they said, let's put you in college early. That's how dual enrollment started. So sometimes there are legislative decisions that are made with what does not seem like a bunch of input from the experts, so the people who know what it is that they're doing. Governors are starting to influence the selection of presidents. Georgia's a good example of that. The chancellor of the Georgia Board of Regents, Sonny Perdue, was announced that the governor had said he's going to be that chancellor, and I had to write a letter saying, Governor, with all due respect, you have a board that makes that decision. Even if they end up that way, it's still their decision. That didn't make me a popular person. Yeah, that's not the word I was looking for, but that'll work. We also have board members interfering with administrative stuff, telling you who to hire and which contracts you can sign. I've got one president right now who can't even hire a basketball coach because his board has to approve every hire he makes. That is just ludicrous. You hire the president and then the president hires everybody else. So I've got to make a trip down there. And then you've got alumni who, are trying to tell you how to run the institution, even though they're not giving you any money. They've got all these ideas about what you need to be doing. I tell the presidents, you need to say, thank you so much for that input. It's going to cost me money to do that. When you write me a check, I'll think about it. Otherwise, leave me alone. We have to, like I said, educate legislators about the triad. There is a role for the state, a role for the institution, and a role for the federal government. We need to train boards. 4.2 B and C have to do with separate but equal, as it were, in their roles, and conflicts of interest. Those are two standards that we have. And then improve communication with alumni. Be transparent. Let them know why it is that you've come up with a strategic plan and what it's going to mean and what it's going to cost and stuff. Academic offerings with non-institutional entities. This is becoming bigger and bigger with what we call educational entities like Straighterline and edX and all those companies out there that are not accredited but come to offer you instruction on your behalf or to support your back office services on your behalf. We still, as an accreditor, hold you responsible for whatever they do. This is your institution. Those degrees have your name on it, and so we expect that you're going to manage the faculty that are teaching, the curricular offerings, and everything else as though it were your course. Even the federal government has said you may not offer a degree that is more than 50% provided by one of these educational entities because we have no way of validating the quality of what it is that they're offering. There's not an accreditor for those entities yet. Maybe one forthcoming, but it's not there yet. In the future, we need to ensure that those student learning outcomes really are the same, whether they're offered by your faculty on campus or by the company with whom you contract online. Ensure that the faculty who are teaching those courses from that other entity are indeed qualified, and that the college faculty actually reviews the courses, the expected outcomes, and everything else that goes along with it. Again, your name is going on that transcript for that course, so we hold you responsible for the quality of what it is they're offering. Credentials, again, the short-term credentials, this is the topic du jour, because it'll change tomorrow. There'll be something else, I'm sure. But right now, employers are so desperate to get people into the workforce that either they're offering their own training programs or they are asking you to put in smaller chunks of instruction so that we can prepare students just enough to get them in the door of being able to work. And then they can come back later, perhaps, to get a full academic offering. But credentials are the big thing right now. Some students are earning those credentials and then bringing them to you and asking you to now give them traditional college credit for them. And so you've got to find a way to go look at the outcomes that they had and what was in the course, who taught the course, is this the same quality as what it is that you're offering. Many institutions, University of Texas system has just done a big thing on micro-credentials that they're putting in. So this is not just a local institution trying to respond to the economic needs in that local community. These are big state institutions that are moving forward with trying to meet the demand nationally, not just within the, for example, El Paso or Austin area. Yes, ma'am.
So I find this interesting because it seems like it's going to go against that whole graduating students. So this is going to be a little snippet of information that you're going to need to take classes for 3, 6, 9 months, whatever it is. But we're not sending a student out with a degree. So again, everybody's very interested in who you're graduating and how many you're graduating. This seems to be going against that.
I didn't say it was logical. I'm just telling you that that's what's happening. Now, many institutions are being successful in nurturing students enough to say, here are the 3 classes that you need to go get a work, but then come back and let's do this, and then come back and let's do this. It's tough, though, because students, they come, they want to get a job, they got a job, they don't need you anymore.
And that was kind of my
That's
second
exactly
part of
right.
this. I can
And
see that's the trend, because I'm seeing it in like technology especially. It changes so much, and you may only need 6 months of this training to learn how to do this software, learn how to do this platform, and so they do just that and then can go out and get a job with that.
I have, because of the pandemic, I've not had a chance to meet with federal legislators to talk about this. This will be a topic of conversation at our NACSCOC recognition hearing, though. You're gonna zap me for having institutions that have this low graduation rate, but look at the credentials that they have given. You can't have it both ways. And fortunately, many of the folks on NACSCOC understand that. And many people in Congress understand that. And sometimes I'm very jaded. I've been here too long. It depends on how much donation they're getting from which industry that they're listening to. If the automotive folks are saying this is what I need, then they'll say, oh, fine. But if the lawyer said, I don't know. So we're working through that. But yes, you're right. It's going to be a big deal. Yep. But it is the employers that's driving this. It's not so much students, it's not so much institutions, it's not so much federal government. It's employers that are driving this, because they need employees. And with the pandemic, it got worse. It exacerbated the situation, because fewer and fewer people came back to work. First of all, people forget we lost 1 million people to death. That's a big chunk of the workforce. Even if only 50% of those people were working at the time, that's still 500,000 people we lost out of the workforce. And then you take those who went back home, to take care of family members or whatever. That's a big loss out of the work. And so yes, employers are doing whatever they can to get people back in the doors working. And so yeah, it's going to be a minute. I don't know how long you all will put up with that, because I won't be here, but. And then who knows what's going to be next? Anybody want to guess? I have no idea. It's just every day there's something different. I don't think we thought that the pandemic was coming and was going to cause us to change the way we provided instruction online. And so who knows what's coming next? The credentials, is one that came up. I'm not creative enough to be able to tell you what the last thing or the next thing is, but trust me, there is something out there, and it is coming, and we may as well get ready for it. I think we have shown the world how nimble we can be because of the pandemic, and so I have great faith that we're going to continue. I know that y'all got this. Thank you very much.